All right. Well, glad to have everybody with us, and I'll turn everything over here to Andrew in just a second. This is our third one of these little sessions, and we've had anywhere from 5 people to about a dozen. So some more may show up, and but we've had some really good discussion. They're up on the Tennessee ASBDA Facebook page, and eventually, hopefully, on our the national ASBDA has a YouTube page. So when we get finished with them, we're going to log them all there. But we, like I say, have had some good discussion, and look forward to this one. Andrew's got a good little presentation lined up, and it's one that's judged in the sight reading room before. There's some interesting things that sometimes we see, but I'm going to let him just turn it over to him and let him go. And we'll have time at the end for questions or comments and things like that. So Andrew, take it away, my man.
Cool. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go ahead and share this presentation real quick here. All right. Well, thank you. And I'm going to just sort of treat this as if I guess we're at a clinic and there's hundreds of people here, and we'll cover all the stuff. But appreciate you letting me do this tonight and just talk about sight reading for a minute. What I thought we'd do is first of all, just talk in general about what it is for those people who might be new to it, might be a new director and have never even taken a group, or maybe even didn't have that experience as a student. And then talk about just managing the event itself and the day of, and how to get through that day and not mess up that whole thing. And then also, and we can stop at that point, and even just if we want to get some more people chime in on some tips for that part. And then the last thing is I want to just spend some time talking about preparing the students. I think especially those who might have middle school students, I think there's some things that we could share that might be beneficial for everybody. So we'll kind of break it up that way. So the first thing I want to talk about is just managing the event itself, just getting through the day and making sure that you're prepared for it. And start with this: just know the rules going into the event. So most associations are going to have some sort of handbook in place, or maybe maybe the event itself that you're going to has a handbook or a rule sheet in place, so you know exactly what it is to expect in the event itself. And those things, the kind of things you want to make sure you know in advance are, how much study time are you allowed with the kids as they prepare to perform the piece, the rehearsal, if you will. So I know with Middle Tennessee MTSBOA, if you're in grades 1 through 4, you get 6 minutes to work with the kids before you play the piece. If you're in grades 5 through 6, you have 5 through 6, you get 7 minutes to do that. Also, make sure you know whether or not the director has time to study the score in advance. Some places are going to do that and some places are not. Again, in Middle Tennessee, I think it's just a pretty recent rule that we decided to let the director study the score for 2 minutes before they start working with the students. Also, make sure you know who is allowed to instruct the students in the room. In I think in a lot of cases, it's just the one director is allowed to talk to students. So in a situation where you might have 2 band directors or a percussion instructor, somebody else with you, they may not be allowed to instruct. So just, you want to make sure you know in advance what those rules are going into it. Another thing to make sure you're prepared for is whether or not what percussion equipment might be needed when you go into that sight reading room. So the way it works for those who may not have ever experienced it, you're going to play your prepared pieces that you've done, your 2 or 3 prepared pieces, typically on a stage in front of a panel of judges, and then probably go to another room. Your band's going to go to another room to participate in the sight reading portion. So for a different judge. So when you go into that room, you want to make sure that if there's certain percussion equipment you need, that you have it with you. So they're typically, they might provide the bass drum, timpani, there might be some mallet instruments, but you may be responsible for bringing your own snare drum or triangle or crash cymbals or those kind of things. So just check the rules ahead of time to know what that's going to be. Another thing you can do to help yourself and your students prepare is to just make sure you're familiar with the parameters of the sight reading music. And I'll put up in Middle Tennessee, we use the UIL criteria from Texas, and it's very clearly laid out for you as far as knowing what keys to expect, what meters, those kind of things, what rhythm patterns. And here, again, Middle Tennessee, if a band is playing grade 2 music on the stage, then they read a level 2 sight reading with that UIL criteria. And again, that's one of those things you want to check ahead of time with the rules, because it may be set up a little bit differently where you are. But I think most places have some sort of criteria laid out that you can check and know how to best prepare the students. So that's really the first thing, is just knowing the rules going into it. The second part of it is getting through the day, is just having a plan for how all that's going to work. So, and this is kind of, I guess, where we get into the do's and don'ts a little bit, and the things that can happen. So first of all, have a plan for how your students are going to enter the sight reading room. I know for me, at one year, we left the stage and we had a band guide that was very enthusiastic and very helpful, but they just took off with the band. I was still standing on the stage collecting things and doing that kind of stuff, and was in an unfamiliar place, and that involved the students going down different stairs and that kind of thing. And I think the band ended up in about 3 different places that were not the sight reading room. And eventually we all got there. But by the time they got there, they were completely out of order. They had kind of lost all sense of decorum and anything that you wanted to have happen. And so once we got settled in and seated and everything, it went fine. The kids played well. And we actually got all 1s that year on every category on the sheet except deportment. We got a 2 in deportment because of the way we came in the room. So ever since then, I always try to make sure I really address that part of it with the kids. So I like to make sure that when they are leaving one place and going to the next, that I try to get in front of the band and go into that sight reading room before the band comes in. I tell the students, you don't come in until I tell you to come in. That way I have a chance to check and see what the setup is and what the chairs and the layout with the chairs and stands. And if anything needs to be adjusted, we can do that. Some places may allow you to move the chairs and stands around. Some of them may not. They may want everything to stay like it is, and you adjust your students accordingly. But if you get in there first, you know what that's gonna look like, and you can start, you can direct the students in. And of course, making sure they know they've got to be, really quiet and stay focused during that time, so you can give them those instructions, and they can make a good first impression as they come in for that sight reading judge. Another thing to do is just to make sure that you have a plan for distributing music, that you've practiced that a little bit with your kids. I know Susan Waters is a great example where she prepares envelopes for her kids with, there's a clarinet envelope, there's a flute envelope and that kind of thing. And they practice handing that envelope to one student in each section and having them distribute the music for the section. So the kids have gone through that process, and that doesn't, so they don't get discombobulated during all of that stuff going on and lose their focus. So just thinking that through and how you want that music to be distributed. Also, make sure the students know ahead of time how you want parts assigned. So in the cases, trumpets, clarinets, trombones, if it's a 2-part piece, who plays first and second? If it's a 3-part piece, who's going to play what part? Percussion as well. Kind of having a plan for, who's going to play snare, bass, mallet parts, that kind of thing. I think all of us as directors, we try to make sure our students are in a typical concert cycle. We're rotating them through all the different percussion instruments and that kind of thing, so they're not, you don't have the one guy that plays snare all the time. However, I think in a sight reading situation, it's good if you've got that kid is going to nail the snare part. that's probably the one you want to play it in the sight reading room. I think it's okay in that situation to go ahead and have that figured out. The next part is just how to effectively rehearse, and that's probably the biggest part of this, having a plan and preparing the kids for it. During that 6 minutes or 7 minutes, again, check that rule book and know what kind of things are allowed and aren't allowed, because it's different in different places. I think most places, and definitely around here, you're allowed to sing parts, you can clap, you can count rhythms, pretty much anything except playing the instruments you can do during that rehearsal time. What I like to do, I think a lot of people do, is we sizzle. So we sizzle the part. And the great thing, what I like about sizzling is the fact that, the kids can sizzle rhythm, they can sizzle articulation, they can sizzle dynamics. And while they're doing that, they can do the fingering, slide positions, they can airplay if they're a percussionist. So, essentially you're rehearsing the piece during that time. And while they're sizzling through the piece, you can give them all those pointers as far as, pointing out articulation things, pointing out those accidentals, key signatures, going over with them how you're going to do those transition spots, how you're going to start the piece, how you're going to end the piece. So many things you can do during that time, and it happens in real time. It's like they're playing, except you're giving them the instruction while they're doing it. So if you've done that enough with the kids where they've practiced that, they get pretty good at learning how to log those things in their brain as you're going through that you're saying and doing, and then do that when it's time to play. So that's the approach I think works really, really well. Couple things just to watch out for with that. Be careful that you don't ignore percussion. I think that's my weakness when I start looking at the score, is not letting my eyes get down there in the percussion section enough. And I think, especially with some of the way the sight reading things can be written, sometimes some of the percussion parts might not make any sense at all. You get cymbal crashes written in places where you would never normally have a cymbal crash, but it's going to be there in that piece. And if you miss it, then chances are your kids are probably going to miss it too. So try to make sure you're getting your eyes down in there. I know I've watched Debbie Burton prepare her band during sight reading a couple of times. She's really good at getting the kids to focus down in the percussion section too. So have a recovery plan. So whatever that might be, with your kids, as far as if they get lost while they're playing the piece, what are they supposed to do? And training them to look up at you and have whatever signals, plans you have in place, whether it be you're yelling out a measure number if you go that route, or one thing I've seen used very effectively is a countdown system. So where when the piece starts approaching a rehearsal letter or a rehearsal measure, let's say you're 4 measures away, the director's holding up a 4, and then the 3 measures away, 3, and then 2, 1, and then here we are. So that can be very effective. If you choose to do something like that, of course, you got to practice it a lot, and you got to stick to it in the moment if you've got the kids trained to do something like that. But just them knowing what they need to do when that happens. Also, during that prep time, make sure you use all your time. That's probably one of the biggies that people mess up. If you've got 6 minutes, you should use 6 minutes. If you have sizzled through the piece in 4 minutes and you're like, well, we're done, don't turn to the judge and say, well, we're good to go, because chances are some things are not going to go well, and that judge is going to wonder why you didn't use that time more effectively. So there's all kinds of things. If you've sizzled through the piece and they did a pretty good job, you can always go back. You can sizzle through transition spots. You can practice the end. You can practice getting started. Maybe you do need to isolate some sections. Maybe that's your moment to say, hey, percussion, let's just go over a section of just you guys for a minute. You can clarify articulations. just have them do some more again and get more dynamic contrast out of them. There's so many things you could do. If the kids are doing really well, and you can go through and start identifying a little bit more of who has the melodic material, you can start talking about balance and adjusting for balance during the piece and giving them some better direction on that. There's so many things you can do with that time. So make sure you use all the time. And then the last thing on this part is of having a plan is have a plan for student questions. Decide ahead of time, do you even want to allow them to ask questions? If you do, give your students really firm direction on what's a good question and what's a bad question, because those exist in the sight reading room, good ones and bad ones. So make sure that you give them direction on that. Make sure they know how to ask a question. If they've got a particular question about a rhythm or a note, that they know how to raise their hand and say, Mr. Phillips, measure 4, beat 3. Is that supposed to be an F sharp? So they can be efficient with the way they ask the questions, and you don't waste any of that time that you've got. So have a plan for that, because you don't want to go down a rabbit hole and then you lose a bunch of time when students start asking questions during that. So those are the big things as far as getting through the day, just knowing the rules and having a plan. Jeff, I want to talk a little bit about preparing the students before the event. We can do that, or we can pause and let some people chime in on what we've done so far. It's your call.
I would suggest right now, going on after seeing the slides that you've got prepared,
Okay.
to go ahead and get through these. And I'm kind of jotting down some things, and other folks, if you've got questions or comments, jot them down. We'll go at the end here.
Cool. Sounds good. So thinking about preparing the students ahead of time and how to help them feel comfortable and to have a successful experience when they go to CPA and go through that sight reading process. What we do, obviously, we should all be on a regular basis doing some sort of sight reading. And I think sometimes that might look a little different, high school and middle school. I think that sight reading doesn't mean that you necessarily are sight reading full pieces of music every single day. But I think if you have a plan in middle school, for sure, of presenting rhythm patterns and things throughout the year, articulation patterns, technical studies, and that kind of thing, and helping them develop that vocabulary, part of that kind of counts as sight reading as well. When we start preparing to go to CPA, where we've really got to sit down and play a piece beginning to the end without stopping. I think a lot of times with middle school students, that's very daunting, because that's a hard thing on a normal day to do. Most of the pieces that you're going to program in a middle school band, you're not going to probably be able to play them beginning to end the first time you put them out there in front of them. I think that's a little different with a high school group, possibly. But so that whole concept of going beginning to end without stopping can be scary to them. So we like to spend a lot of time leading up to it, just getting them prepared to do that. And the way we do it is a normal rehearsal. What that would look like if we were very focused on sight reading that day would be to spend some time doing some unison rhythm studies together first, followed by some unison melodic studies where the whole band is playing, the same melodies together, and then moving to full ensemble pieces where they're working on actually getting through a piece of music and having independent parts in each section. And just sort of following that routine and stepping up the level that they're doing every day leading up to the event itself. When we do that, there's some things that we do to sort of frame that in for the kids so they can be real successful with it. So we talk about what the non-negotiables are. We said we call it the always list, the things that they should be always doing, regardless of whether they're sight reading or playing something that they've played 100 times. And that is, good posture, good tone, good technique, blend, balance, intonation, good time together, watching the conductor, all those things that, we want them to do. But so often when they get looking at a new piece of music, if they're allowed, they'll just kind of forget all of that, and you kind of wonder, like, who is this band in front of me, and why do they sound this way? So just constantly reminding them of what those always things are, those non-negotiables. And then we help them understand what those priorities should be when they sight read to keep the piece working, to keep the piece together. So number one, making sure they understand number one priority is getting the rhythms correctly. If they don't know when to play, it certainly doesn't matter what they're playing or how they're playing it if they're not playing at the right time. So rhythm, and then second priority being pitches. So knowing when to play and knowing what to play. And then as we do that, again, we're constantly reminding them, and you can tell by going through that rehearsal process I mentioned earlier, you can tell when they let the pitches become the front thing in their mind, and things start falling apart. And we have to remind them, no, rhythm's more important. I'd rather you miss the note, get the rhythm, and just constantly preaching to them till it becomes kind of a habit. Of course, then the third priority is articulation style, fourth priority phrasing, and then 5 dynamics. And just getting them trained to think that way helps them be a lot more successful in the moment. We always tell them with articulation, we define a default articulation. We tell them that's legato, because especially with younger students, if that's not their go-to, then they're not going to do that. They're not going to play smooth and connected. And I think that's a good starting point. So we train them that's their go-to. We focus on simple notes, simple rhythms, and simple notes when we're doing all this review, because we know that most of the problems that happen in sight reading are usually due to them not holding pitches their full value, and skipping rests, not counting through rests. So we spend a whole lot of time just on very simple rhythms, because ultimately that's what's going to keep the piece together. We try to really balance during that time reteaching concepts versus repetition. Obviously, we want to push them to be able to play through something without stopping. But at some point, as you're going through that process, if they're making the same mistakes every single time, the same rhythm mistakes, the same key mistakes, obviously there's some reteaching that needs to happen. So it's just a constant balance of those two things that we got to keep in mind. And then just another tip for preparing the students that I absolutely love, and that is sight reading for the parents. Like most people, I think we call it the CPA preview concert, and we play the pieces that we're going to perform for the parents, but we also sight read on stage in front of the parents. And we've even put microphones, lapel mics on before. So even when we talk the kids through the prep, the audience can hear everything we're saying, which is good practice for us too, because if, that's under pressure with an audience watching, if you can do it with them, you can probably be okay in front of a judge. And it also it puts the pressure on the kids a little bit too, prior to going to the event, that, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this in concert. And that's been just awesome. And the response we've gotten from parents on that is always so cool, because they just get some insight that they wouldn't normally have. So that's a real good little tip that we like to do. As far as some resources, just to point out to everybody, everything I mentioned earlier with doing the unison rhythms and melodic sight reading, we do that with Sight Reading Factory. Brittany Gerald is on here. She works with me, and she's actually the tech guru. I'm sitting here trying not to mess up Zoom right now. She's amazing, and we've now got 3 big screens in front of the band, so we can do Sight Reading Factory with the whole band during rehearsal. It's really cool. But what I love about Sight Reading Factory, and I'm sure most people are familiar with that, is that you can choose those parameters that you want. So if you're really focused on a certain rhythm pattern or a certain key, certain time signature, you can set that all up ahead of time before your class, and so the kids can practice unison rhythms or melodic sight reading through that. It will generate multi-part sight reading. That gets a little bit hard to deal with as far as looking at a screen and having all the kids play. So we usually don't do that part of it. For learning to do that and actually play something with multiple parts, a couple of books that we love that are definitely middle school friendly, but I would say there's probably a few high school bands that would even love this too and could get a lot out of it. There's a series called Sight Reading for Band. It's by Southern Music, and I think it's been around forever. And it's you can get it through Hal Leonard now, and it's just a great series, and it's wonderful for kids, especially when you're trying to train the kids to play through a piece without stopping and just building their confidence to do that. It's a great book for doing that. The very first piece in volume 1 is in 3/4 time. It's in the key of E flat, and everybody plays dotted half notes in every measure. There's not even a rest, but it's all harmonized and it sounds really nice. And so when the kids do that for the first time and truly go through it, and hardly ever does it go badly. They go through that piece, they get beginning to end, they sounded really good doing it. Their confidence level starts going up. And as you work through that book, they just very gradually, they'll change a little rhythm pattern here and add some independence. The keys start to change. Eventually there's some transition things but it's a very slow process, and but it's super for building confidence, especially with like a 7th grade level group, or just any group that's never truly been made to sight read through something before. Another series that we love is the good old Queenwood series. I think a lot of people know the beginning band series. It's John Evanson and Ann McGinty. There's a ton of those books, a ton of volumes of those. And there's even a developing band series that are more like a grade 2, 2.5 level pieces. And those are wonderful as well, because they're actually nice pieces too. So the kids have fun playing them. They very much line up in a lot of ways with the UIL criteria. So they're great practice for preparing what they're going to do at that event. With the exception of the beginning band books, they do have unison bass line, so the trombones are playing octaves with the tubas, and the percussion parts are a little bit limited. So I would not recommend it as the only thing you did as far as practicing that going through sight reading, but it's a great resource. And of course, the UIL, you can order UIL pieces. And so we've tried to kind of put our own little library of pieces together that, and we like those because they're truly composed like it's going to be at the event. So, so many times I think with, especially middle school, just pulling out concert pieces, so many times, a lot of those pieces may not have the variety in the piece that you really want the kids to experience to prepare them for this. It's good to do, but you may not hit all the things you need to hit. So having those UIL pieces handy is very, very good too. So that's about it. So hopefully that helps everybody a little bit. Not only just preparing for the, just getting through the day, but giving you some resources and some tips to help the kids prepare and feel really comfortable going into the day. And that's all I got.
Andrew, good points. I think I want to, if you don't mind, reiterate and add to maybe a couple things. One of the things he first mentioned was how students enter the room. And while that may seem like something that's sort of trivial, that first impression makes a huge deal on somebody that's sitting there judging. I mean, you're at a 1 or a 2 level when you walk in. I'll never forget a group one time. They hit the door, and it was like they were wild children. I mean, they came in. This wasn't mine. This is what I was judging with. And I mean, they were swinging from the rafters. I have a feeling I know how they played on stage, and I did look, and yeah, it was not too good there either. But I mean, they came in, they were talking, they were really just screaming at each other about just whatever. And this was a high school group. And I managed to get them to sit down. And then their director, as Andrew said, you come in first. He came wandering in, and his instructions were horrible. I mean, it was just, it was bad. It was bad from the time, but you knew that when you saw him walk in. I mean, you may say you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but when they come in like that, you do, you get a first impression. And, you know, sometimes we get the judges that I don't think they intend to trick children, but they'll come in and, hey, y'all finished on stage. Well, just have a good time. Unbutton your coat, take your uniform off. Yeah, just get and just relax. Everything's fine. I used to tell mine, no, we're not relaxed until we get out of there and you get back to the bus. That's when you can relax. Because I know they want to just have the kids, you know, be at ease, but sometimes, you know, they're a little bit too much on that. Just some other notes I wrote out. One of the things I thought was always distracting too, as a judge, and I know it's a safety, but if the kids get lost, yeah, have your system like you Andrew's talking about of, you know, you're going to call out measure numbers, letter numbers, things like that. But if the thing's going well and it sounds fine and there's no problems, it's kind of distracting to an adjudicator if the melody is just really beautiful and you just scream out, let her be, for absolutely no, I mean, if anything, that distracts the students from what they're doing, and it certainly distracts somebody that's trying to listen and adjudicate. And with that in mind, another thing, just to, as you familiarize and you talk to the students about the process and how things are going to go, most sight reading rooms are band rooms, or they're smaller areas. You know, make them aware that there could be a judge sitting within 2 feet of them. I mean, I've really been seated at a desk and there's a student just right in front of me. So everything I say, they can hear. Every little squeak they make, I can hear. So it's important for them just to know that there may be somebody sitting right beside them, especially those kids that are on the front row. Another one of Jeff's experiences he heard one time, well, actually on several occasions, there's no need to try to impress an adjudicator with your knowledge of music theory and terminology. Only use the terms that your kids are used to you using. You don't have to stand there. Now let's see, this piece will be an E flat, wait, actually it's in C minor. Well, if the kids have never played in C minor, they have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to get a question on that. Are there any questions? Yes. What's this? What are you talking about? It's an E flat. They're not going to understand. Or one of my favorites was, everyone, we should watch the caesura. Watch out for the caesura here. Caesura. Oh. Questions. What's a caesura? And you just went, railroad tracks. So whatever terms you're used to using, use them. You don't have to try to impress the judge with your analytical, theoretical knowledge. Just go for it. But again, as Andrew was saying, have a process and just incorporate some of that, if not every day, every other day. So it's not something that you wait till, well, you know, we got CPA next week and we haven't practiced sight reading yet, so I guess we better start. By that point, it's too late. You have to have their minds trained, and you too, so that you kind of have, I'm going to do these things in this order, so you'll be all right. Couple things that Andrew mentioned also about counting. The most errors I ever have heard are on long notes, rest, and if there's a tied note across the bar, that's going to be miscounted. all the time. So if you're on the lookout for those and can point those out, that's important. Also, on having a plan, or unless you have a perfectly instrumentated group, what do we do with cues? Do we play the cues? If we don't have it, definitely play the cues. But sometimes there's that child that owns an oboe that you just really didn't want to hear on stage, but in the sight reading room, you might say, oh, if we've got oboe cues, yes, you need to play them, just for strength, just for security. You can be kind of diplomatic, but get in the habit of letting them do that when you rehearse. And the last thing I wrote down, this is, I guess, more toward the high school things to practice, as far as, if you want to call them method books. A couple of the old tried and true things that we just kept a stock of were the 40 rhythmical studies. It's an ugly old book with ugly old exercises in it that makes the clarinets play in terrible registers, but it covers pretty much every rhythm pattern you're going to see. And then another one that's by the same composer, I believe it's Grover Yaws, Y-A-U-S. It's called 101 Rhythmic Rest. So those are two great oldies but goodies. They're still published. They're not too expensive to get, like a classroom set or something like that, and just read through one year, read through the other one the next year. So you just kind of rotate things like that out. But there you go. There's my nickel. But anybody else have any questions, comments? Just unmute and go.
Hey, Jeff, I thought of one other thing. You were talking about cues and assigning parts and stuff. Talking about percussion in that room and the assignments. One thing I failed to mention is, if you've got more percussionists than there are parts, which I think happens a lot in sight reading, because a lot of times the sight reading might only have a snare, bass, maybe a mallet part and a crash cymbal or a triangle. If you've got extra percussionists, rather than having them sit out, have them double up on a part, not necessarily playing it, but one kid's playing bass drum, the other one's standing next to him, tracking the notes. So your bass drum's where it needs to be. So I try to get all those kids involved in some way back there.
Other folks?
Andrew, I know that you guys have those TVs on the left and the right now. Is there any other way to use Sight Reading Factory other than just like those, like the full basically score of all the parts that are there at the same time and all the staff notes and all that? You know what I mean? Because I use just obviously you only have the one projector, and but I feel like even if I had the screen on the left and the right, it would still be kind of tough for them to see their part. You know what I mean? Is that just something you have to get used to, or is there something else that you guys do make that a little more easier?
Yeah, I think if it's too jumbled to be able to do melodic sight reading, because you need to be able to see every line, I think your best bet with that is just to stick to unison rhythms. But even with that, you can do some things, even just trying to get that concept of prioritizing rhythm over note. You can still have them do things like, let's play this, you got an 8-bar rhythm. Let's play, the E flat scale, and on beat 1 of every measure, we're going to change to the next note of the scale. Or make it real interesting. We're going to change on beat 2. We're really going to throw you off. But I mean, you can do things like that to get that same, that training process, what you're trying to get them trained to do, if you don't have that ability to put that up there. As far as other just unison, if you're wanting unison melodic sight reading, I don't know, in middle school land, other than the band book, I don't know, Jeff, can you think of, maybe we need to write that book? That's
Yeah, those that I mentioned and those that you mentioned have some unison patterns in them, and then some of the other method books will have rhythm reading things at the back, that type thing. But I don't, yeah, Zach has he has his hand raised. I'm not sure how to unmute you, Zach, but there we go.
On Sight Reading Factory, you can actually print off individual parts. So you can make like a multi part, and then you can print off each one and just hand it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And as far as looking at them, yeah, I'm with you. We only had one projector when I was at Hendersonville, and by the time you stood at the back of the room, you couldn't. I mean, I couldn't see them, but I doubt if anybody else could either, or on the extreme wings.
Well, if you want to do like multiple TVs on a budget, Brittany Gerald she's the one you need to talk to. She will take care of you. She'll hook you up.
Hey, so I have a question. It's Jess Graves from Heritage. So you were speaking about percussionists, and I'm curious about what the percussionists can actually do while the wind players are sizzling or while they're clapping. I think specifically for snare and mallets. Are they able to turn their sticks around and play on the instruments that way? Or would it be better for them to, tap the rhythms on their chest? Or what's a good way that you would suggest for them to be able to physically, quote unquote, play the instrument without playing the instrument? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we would have mallet players would use the other ends, and maybe not even actually, touch the instruments, especially the marimba. But yeah, they would do that, and timpani players also. Snare, I really don't remember what they would do. I mean, somehow they did go through things, but I don't remember whether they physically like tapped on their leg or what. I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, we still have our kids. I mean, I know it can get kind of crazy with a certain, snare parts or whatever, but we still have them sizzle the rhythms too.
Okay.
Just like the winds are doing, and still just, we call it air playing. They're just, playing over top of the mallet or in the air with their sticks. But yeah, we still just have them sizzle with the winds on that.
Okay. And the mallets, timpani and all that, making a tone wouldn't be a huge issue, you think? Because technically the wind player is not supposed to make any kind of tone or anything. I just want to make sure that if I go in there and I have my mallet players turn their sticks around and they're kind of, playing along certain keys, if they make tone, that they're not going to get gigged for that.
Yeah, I don't think they're supposed to make any sound.
Yeah.
At least Middle Tennessee.
Right.
If they use their hands, like just touching the note.
I mean, that might be a possibility too, just to
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, Andrew, the timpani player can tune, though, right? As I understand in sight reading, timpani player can tune quietly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Debbie Heiss, there, you have your hand raised.
Okay, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, I do believe you can't make any sounds on your instrument in the percussion, and we have them sizzle and tap on their legs, and then you could sizzle and the person with their finger without using the fingernail to make a sound, but just so they know where they're at on their keyboard. I think that's the safest thing, because I know that if our snare person plays in the air and they accidentally hit the drum, I would say that'd be a point off. So, but there was something else I was going to say. My husband's bowling right now, so I'm in the party room. I know I joined late, but it's really interesting because Kathy does the sight reading, but I have a question about the two director thing. Is it my understanding, because I've never done anything except for walk the kids in, and Kathy is it the back end, making sure they've got all the percussion equipment. And so I walk them in and they're not making any sound, and we practice it at school. And then I have them not sit down until everybody's in, and they all make sure they have a chair and a stand, and I sit them down. And so, but after that, I go sit in the back, and we've already told the kids they can't ask me any questions. And I just want to make sure that Is that correct? When we have two directors, that I just stay in the back and I don't do anything to help them. Is that?
Only one director, the director of note or whoever's leading is the only one that can actually give instructions to the students.
Okay.
In another area, actually in another state, I observed that differently. And I thought it was a complete zoo. There was one director standing up and the other one was barking stuff that, to me, it was complete chaos. But I know in Middle Tennessee, we do have that. Whoever's giving the instruction or, comes in, they're going to conduct it. They're the only one that can give the
Right.
instructions. Now, if you're in the back of the room with percussion saying, hey, make sure you cover this and you cover this, quietly,
That's probably it. Okay. We have also, I think you were, like you said, a lot of times it's only a snare and bass because we're middle school and I'm Rockville Middle, everybody. We're middle school, and so the sight reading is complicated. So it's bass, snare, maybe cymbal or triangle, like you said, and mallets, and we double up on mallets, and then we do the same thing. I think, Andrew, that was very helpful, because if I didn't have Kathy and I was by myself, that would be something that would be good to know, to have like two people at the bass drum, two people at the snare. And we have one that will kind of point and participate. Okay. And I think that's real helpful, because I wouldn't have known that years ago if I was to go into sight reading by myself. So that was very helpful to know what to do with percussion. So I'm trying to think if there's another question. My mind is blank right now, but I'll raise my hand again. So, all right, thank you guys. I'm gonna turn my audio off if I can figure out how to do it on my phone. Okay.
I have a question. Malik Sylvester from Sycamore High School. So you said have the students walk in kind of calm and collected, just so it's not a zoo, as you said. Can you speak to the amount of time turnover from the moment the students walk in, like the director's responsibility? I know that the director will have like 2 minutes to look at the score of the piece before the students are handed the piece, correct? And so is that, I mean, what do you recommend for us directors? Do we walk in, make sure the kids there sit down first, then look at the score? Or how about would you recommend us using our time when we walk in the room?
Well, a judge is going to give you some of those things that you can and can't do. I mean, they will give you your score when they're ready for you to have it, and so forth. So it's not like it's laying up there and you can just go in. So you get your students in, make sure everybody's got a chair, a stand, and really the good adjudicators are going to take it from there, and they're going to get, or their assistant's going to give instructions on, make sure everything's under your chair, nothing's on your stand. I'm going to give you an envelope, then you need to pass it out, and that. And then most of the better adjudicators I've had will give instructions to the students and to the directors once they get in the room and they're ready for them to do things. So, I mean, Andrew, you want to?
No, I was just going to say that I mean, we've had some times where we were taking like a pretty large 7th and 8th grade group combined, where we got in there and there were not enough chairs, not enough stands. They didn't have enough copies of music. So there was a lot of logistical things to manage. And I say at that point, your top priority is making your kids feel comfortable in that moment and making sure that they're seated and they have what they need to be successful. And even when that happened, there was still plenty of time. I mean, we got all that situated, got everybody seated. They even ran to the copier and made copies for the music, and still had time to get through everything and do the whole process, and left. And I think there was still time left on the schedule. So again, I think just top priority is just making sure your kids feel comfortable in that moment, and that they have what they need.
Yeah. I think Laura and then Debbie.
During the sight reading process, is there someone who is announcing the time as it's elapsing for your 2 minutes? And do you have the option to tell them how often you want to be informed of the amount of time that's elapsed?
In Middle Tennessee, we do. In most other groups, there's something you can say, if we have 6 minutes, do you want a warning at 2 minutes? Do you want a 1 minute that they'll tell you? So so kind of yes to both those. Yeah, there's either a monitor in the sight reading room, or the judge will themselves will tell you when you've got so much time left, or do you want to have a 2-minute warning? You know, they'll ask you that, and then that way you can kind of gauge things.
Okay, and then a further question, do we know, are we told ahead of time which percussion instruments we need to have with us? That they do it that way in other states. I'm wondering if they do it that way in Middle Tennessee.
Well, I know in Middle Tennessee, usually it may not be in the handbook itself, but it's going to be in those emails and those instructions that come out, you know, the week before, when they're telling you, you know, the things to remember and bring. It's probably going to be in those instructions as to what you need in the sight reading room. We're just even on the stage as well. Back to the other question, as far as the warnings and everything, just thinking about preparation. That's something that it's also important. I think you practice that with your kids ahead of time. If you have a way of when you're going through that process a couple of times, to have somebody, even if it's one of your kids, with a timer going 2 minutes, 1 minute, because I mean, young kids for sure, that can shake them for just a minute. So even just practicing that little thing can be a good thing for them.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And then just one last comment. I had dropped it in the chat, and I don't know if anyone has used the Zildjian rhythm cards that are on their website for practicing rhythm. But those are, my students really enjoy those, and it's easy to project on the screen. So that's something you don't have to print. You just have to get it up on your screen.
I didn't know those existed. That's neat.
Oh, they're amazing. So yeah, they have 6 different levels. It's under education, and it tells you what the content, the rhythmic content is ahead of time. And it has just like a measure of rhythm followed by a measure of rest with 3 repeats when they first expose it. But then it goes through different levels up to platinum, and it will combine, it'll make sets of 3 measures of rhythm with the rest in between, and it can be performed either just with a metronome, but it also has tracks in different styles underneath.
Wow.
Really, really good stuff.
Good.
Thank you.
Have other burning questions or comments or anything else? Reggie Coleman, I saw you unmuted for a second. You've got something burning there.
No, I was just gonna say thank you.
Hey, Jeff, question in the chat. Any recommendations on what percentage of your regular rehearsal time should be spent on sight reading? I think that might, I don't know. I think in middle school, we might treat that a little differently than high school. I don't know. I'll let you chime in on the high school part of that.
I mean, okay, for the high school stuff that I did, yeah, and this gets kind of into just the whole rehearsal planning. I mean, you know, without going off on one of Jeff's tangents, you know, there's a blurred line sometimes between what we call warm up and what we call fundamental practice. So, you know, the directors that say, I've got to warm up my band for 45 minutes, I don't think that's physically possible. Go back to one of my private teachers saying you warm up for 7 minutes and the rest of it's practice. So, I'd have fundamental exercises and warm-ups, but some of those things, as far as the rhythm reading, the scale passages, technique exercises that foster good sight reading skills, kind of go in that post warm-up fundamental practice. I mean, like every day. And then when it comes to, there were the times where we'd use sight reading out of one of those books that I mentioned, the 40 Rhythmical Studies, or something like that. And then there'd be maybe the next day we would actually read a piece of music or part of a piece of music. So it wasn't the same thing every day, but it was like what percentage. If it was a 90-minute period, the warm up through what I would say are fundamentals or sight reading would probably be 25 minutes of it at the most, and then getting into whatever out of a 90-minute class. So I and maybe adjust that appropriately for whatever level. So.
Yeah, I think for us at the middle school, because when we're doing a sight reading focus, I like to break it up and have that time where it's just rhythmic for a while, it's just melodic for a while, unison, and then pieces. So when we're truly, and when I say sight reading, I'm talking about reading a piece beginning to end without stopping, not just rhythm patterns and things that we would do normally on regular days. So for me, just because I like to have that little process of doing that, we pretty much dedicate certain days where it's like, oh, today's a sight reading day, where we're focused just solely on that, past the normal fundamental stuff. That works for us in our schedule, but that may not be the way everybody would want to do it.
Yeah, we had maybe 2 days, but Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday would be a full sight reading thing. The others were more toward fundamentals, which kind of goes back to an old guy. There's nobody on here that would ever even remember him. But you would have heard of his uncle, a guy named Walter King. He was a band director at Goodlettsville High School. It doesn't exist anymore. And used to work with Walter a lot. Fantastic musician. He's passed away now. But Walter used to say, if you know all your rhythms and you know all your notes for the scale, said you should be able to play everything, which is sort of an oversimplification. But if you've gone through those fundamentals and read just basic rhythms as a group, and you are familiar with scale patterns, arpeggio patterns, then really reading music is just kind of fusing those two things together. I mean, yes, it does take practice, but Walter, one time we were talking, I'd known him for a couple of years, and he said something about his uncle BB. I was like, your uncle's BB King? Yeah, whatever. So, Brittany, say, once they are more comfortable with sight reading pieces, though, we typically will rehearse then in the class, with sight reading a piece. Yeah, I think that's good also, to put it at the end.
Yeah, that's especially true as we start getting to the, it's close to CPA, and we're kind of in that, hey, let's come in, let's do fundamental things, let's do some ensemble stuff, let's play through our pieces that we're going to perform, hit a couple spots. All right, we got time, let's sight read a piece. So yes, definitely at a certain point that would happen.
I have 2 questions. So the first one, my group hasn't probably went to CPA in quite some time. So in working to prepare them and kind of help them to understand what this CPA is, do you have any tips or resources that you could kind of direct me to, like, this is a way to help them understand what this is, other than saying it's like a marching competition, but just we're sitting down and playing our instruments now?
Well, I think that's, gosh, anybody else feel free to chime in. But a lot of how they perceive this will be how you present it. Just like a marching band contest, you let them know that this is where they're going to have people listen to them, both in the concert portion and in the sight reading portion. They're going to give them feedback on things they do well and things that they need to work on, so that they kind of know where they are. It's not a contest where there's first, second, third place, but it's here's where you are. And if you kind of present it like that, sometimes it takes some of the pressure off of it, but they do need to know that there'll be other people listening to them that've never heard them before, not just judges. There in Middle Tennessee, there's a requirement that you listen to, what is it, one or two other groups, Andrew? I can't remember.
Well, I don't know if it's officially required or not.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's
I know.
Festival.
I know that for us, that's what I was going to say, Malik, is that's we even tell the parents and the kids that's part of the experience for us is not just going and doing our thing and hitting the McDonald's at the end. I mean, we're gonna go and we're gonna listen to other groups, and we plan our day. We always plan our day so that's a part of it, and it's cool because a lot of times you're gonna hear such a variety of groups because sometimes the way it might be scheduled, you might go in with a high school group and perform and then get to hear a middle school group play and just hear groups at all different levels. And then we do a lot of discussion when we get back about what, not only how we did, and we listen, after we've listened to judges' commentary and decided what is great for the kids to hear and what would be helpful and what might not be. We're going to play some of that for the kids. We're going to talk about what we learned, and compare even the judges' reaction to what happened, to how they played, to what they thought about how they played. And then we even discuss the other groups that we heard, and what did you hear? What did you hear that you liked, and that kind of thing. So for us, that's as much part of it as going and doing our own thing, is listening to the other groups and those discussions and stuff. Another thing, Malik, I'd recommend to you, if you can, if I don't know if you're planning like a CPA, pre-CPA concert. I talked about that earlier, about performing our pieces for the parents and even sight reading for the parents. But another thing that we do at that event, we do that with our high school, with Stewart's Creek High School. We're on the same campus, and we'll bring in a couple of guests, judges, if you will, that night to even go through that, and we'll play their commentary the next day, so the kids know, like, oh, okay, that's kind of a practice round, but they kind of get a feel for what that's going to be like. Because for us as a middle school, every year about half the kids we're taking, they're also going for the first time too. So we're having to, teach them what this is. So yeah, framing it right, maybe having some way to practice, and then also just making the event itself more about the whole thing and the other groups than just what your group's doing.
Well, and setting them up for it, I got to think one of the things that I used to do was duplicate the adjudication sheet that the judges will be using in our area. And as we would do get to where we could play from corner to corner on a selection, is pass those out and say, evaluate what you just heard. What did you think about tone quality? What did you think about? And a lot of times they're much more vicious than we are. So in that way they know, oh, so this is what they're going to be listening for specifically. Kind of sets them up.
Well, and I'll add this to that, Jeff, too. Our kids, oftentimes they're not in the same class, so we have to do a couple after school rehearsals or whatever, just to even put the whole band together and practice. And each time we do that, we usually do that 2 to 3 times before the event. So it's not like a whole month of rehearsals, but it's, a few after school days. And we always record in those rehearsals, we always record the last run through of whatever we're doing. And the next day in class, the instruments don't come out. They have their music on their stand and paper in hand and pencil in hand, and we play the recording, and we do exactly what you just said, maybe without the sheets, but where they they critique a little bit. We critique too, but they also get a chance to go, oh man, that didn't sound like, because usually doesn't sound the way they think it does. Sometimes better, sometimes, most times worse. And so that's a great way of training them too. But yeah, it gets them thinking in those terms. And we do talk about, here's what they're listening for. So so maybe consider that, record them, let them critique themselves a little bit before they go.
It can also qualify as a writing assessment that your principals will love.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for
Laura,
that.
got your hand raised again. I'm not used to people raising their hand. I love it.
Yeah, Robert's Rules of Order and all that. At the beginning of the semester, the first day of the semester, I converted the captions of the judging sheet into a writing assignment and put the ratings 1 through 5. And I played a studio recording of the pieces that we played on our December concert. And I said, guys, this is an example of superior performance. And then I had them listen to their own performance. And I explained what the different, captions were, because this is all very new to them. This is my first year of doing concert band with them, thanks to COVID. And so there were a few things that we had talked about as we prepared our concert, but yeah, it was useful to them because they understood that they were not superior, and in most cases also not excellent. And some of them, like Andrew had said, were very hard on themselves, but they were pretty realistic. But I also gave them a chance to reflect on things that they were proud of, and that had gone well in the concert, or that they had thought had gone well before they heard the recording. But it just gave them an opportunity to understand that we're going into an assessment cycle, and that we've had a great time making music and becoming a band. And now there's a bar, and we have to know where it is, and we have to go through a process of trying to go over that bar.
Andrew, you or someone else might be able to answer Malik's question on where to locate the UIL sight reading pieces.
You can actually buy it. I just looked it up to make sure. You can actually buy it on JW Pepper, and it'll tell you when you see it. It'll just be, the title of the piece, but it'll tell you what the sight reading level is and even what year it was written. So yeah, you can just get it. I'm sure there's other places. Mike Chester might know some better resources. I don't know, but you can get it off JW Pepper.
I think you mentioned it, Andrew, and it's still a point for those that are the younger directors will only know it this way, but those that are sort of in the cracks, I won't say older because there's no one here that's like older, except for me. But the grade level you enter, if you enter in grade 3, you'll sight read. It'll say grade 3 according to UIL. There's no more of this. Thank you, Darryl. Yeah, there's no more of. Now let's see. We sight read. Is it 1 level down or 2 level? That created so much confusion years ago that then people would just argue about it. But now but their level 3 is written at a. Don't even worry about that. Just the parameters are all out there where you can see it, and you can see what we do, at least in middle, or what UIL does. Say these key signatures, these rhythm patterns, key change or not. You can see all of that, so it's really clear, and no more confusion in having to do math. I'm going in grade 4. Does that mean I'm level 2? Or is it 3? I don't know. That was a huge deal back in the olden days. Yes, Darryl. Yes.
And the links for that too. If you're MTSBOA from Middle Tennessee, if you go to the CPA handbook online, and you're going through the handbook, those links to the UIL criteria are embedded in that handbook, so you're getting to the right place. There you go.
Oh yeah, Penders. Yeah. Deal with them too. One of So now I don't know whether anybody does orchestra on here or not. That can become a different animal because I think they have UIL things now, but at one point orchestras were sort of an afterthought in some areas. And I remember judging a group, and I got there, I said, "Oh, we've got an orchestra this afternoon. We don't know what we're going to get or what we're going to read. You have an orchestra program at this school." Well, we used to have a string program. So I went digging through their files and found like something, and it was horrible. But I said, what a terrible experience for those students, because they came, everything in band was all laid out, all planned out. And what this group got was me digging something out of an old orchestra file that hadn't been used in 15 years, and it was pretty nasty. So they're getting a little better with keeping up with our string friends now, but not always the case. Well, do we have anything else? There, thank you. Sight read. Who said that? Rob. Sight reading book for better bands. By Jerry West. Yes. That is another one with those other two. I mean, that's enough. I couldn't remember who it was by, but I remember the name Jerry West. I love that method. And it's very progressive. They are insulted when you first pass it out. Oh, this is easy. And then about 3 or 4 pages into it, it's, it just changed. Yeah, Jerry West. Yeah, and he actually has string books out. That's where I first heard of his stuff. Daryl Boston to everyone. Developing Sight Reading Studies and Sight Reading Builders by James Kernow. Also, another good source there. Good stuff here, folks. Well, we've been yakking for about an hour and 45 minutes. That's good stuff. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or answers to life's problems? I memean, anything. Andrew, we certainly thank you for putting this together.
There's no way to cover it all, but to gets the wheels turning. I hope it helped a little bit.
Well, a couple things. I know that there's some kind of football thing next week, but I didn't look at the calendar because I never do. We are going to go ahead and do one last one next week. Our topic is sort of it's sort of a wrap up thing, but what we had planned was like stage decorum, just logistics of getting kids on the bus and that kind of thing. So it may last not long, it may last longer. Maybe we can get in, in the halftime. I don't know. But we'll go ahead with next week's anyway, and see what shows up. But if you do want a professional development letter, if you will email me at jpband, let me see, put this right here in the old chat, jpband at Bell South, I'm still one that still has one of those accounts, .net. If you'll email me there, I will get you a letter back out that says you did this, and you can get hopefully credit for it. If for those of you, that's why you showed up. But we appreciate you being here, and good luck with the event, wherever it might be that you might be going to. So, all right, good.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Reggie.